Hey there, this is Alex over at DuraLabel, and in this video we're going to be going over the chemical module and how to create a label following an SDS sheet. To begin this process, we're just going to want to make sure to open the chemical module itself by clicking on chemical along the left hand side. With the module now open, we just want to make sure we select the appropriate authority type. We can always change that later if we do need to. For our uses though, we're going to stick with the HazCom one that's selected currently. If you do need GHS, you can make that selection. Do note that any changes we do make when it comes to editing, you can always make those changes and change the authority type later, and it won't change any of what's already been entered as you've edited the label. So with HazCom selected, I'm just going to go ahead and click OK, and we can begin working on creating our own label. The first thing that I suggest doing is determine which database you want to be in for the chemical module. By default, you'll begin in the chemicals database, which will have all of our pre-made chemicals already loaded in. If it is something though where you want to work within a unique database that only has your custom labels, that can be done as well. That is something that I personally am going to do, but that's not needed since we do have the ability to search for labels as well through our search bar. If you are wanting to change to the empty database, you'll just click on this paper and gear settings here. That'll bring the option to load a database down at the bottom. Once you have that selected, you'll just want to make sure you choose this chemicals_empty and click OK. Once that's loaded in, you'll notice that we only have our one record instead of the 1500 plus records in our traditional chemicals database. It'll also begin us in this edit label section where we can make all the changes that we're going to be using. If you do want to just use the default chemicals database, I'll go ahead and go back to that and show you an easy way to add a new chemical. We'll click on that load database, click on no since we haven't made any changes, go back into chemicals and click OK. Now that we're back in the original database, if you do want to add a new label to this, you'll click on this new label option at the very top right, and that'll present you with that same basic label that we had in the empty database. Either route is perfectly fine. It's just going to come down to preference. So I'm going to go ahead and get back into the empty database, and then we'll continue. To begin filling out this information, I'm going to refer to the SDS sheet for the chemical specifically. That way I enter the correct chemical name, EC number, UN number, or CAS number if applicable, as well as get the correct signal word entered and any additional information necessary. Filling out this information from an SDS sheet is fairly straightforward. For the most part, we're really only going to be using section 2 from the sheet itself for the hazard statements, precautionary statements, as well as the symbols necessary. However, if you're unfamiliar with the process at all, it may benefit to work with someone who's a little more familiar with the SDS sheets just to make sure you do get the appropriate information included on the label so that it can be compliant. To get started, I'm going to go ahead and enter the chemical name as well as any applicable numbers, so I'll get those entered in really quick and I'll be back so you can see where those will show up. Now that I'm back, I have the chemical name added as well as the CAS number entered. Based on the SDS sheet I was referring to, the EC number and UN number were not available, so I only have the CAS number included. You'll find this information within section 1, so if you do see these included as well, go ahead and add those as needed. Next, I'm going to begin working within section 2, which is going to have the bulk of the information that we continue to add in, such as the signal word, the symbols, as well as the hazard statements and precautionary statements. I'm going to go ahead and get a few of these entered in, and then I'm going to stop about halfway through before I work on any of the statements and show you the changes. Now that I'm back, I've went ahead and updated the signal word from none to warning. I've also added in the symbol that's required per the SDS for this exclamation. You'll notice that we do have 3 black diamonds showing in the spaces where we don't have a need for a symbol. If you are printing on 4-diamond supply where you do have those extra diamonds, this will be necessary to make sure that it is compliant to have those diamonds blacked out instead of left open. If you will be printing on any 1-diamond supply like I'm going to be, we'll go ahead and make that change later to make sure that we have the setup for the appropriate supply we'll be printing on. That way we aren't printing any diamonds where they're not necessary. Next, we're going to be going over the hazard statements and the precautionary statements. Both of these interfaces are going to operate in a similar manner. I'm going to go ahead and open up the hazard statements. That way I can give you guys a quick showing of it. Then I'm going to actually refer to the SDS sheet and make sure I have the correct information being added. With this new window open, you'll notice that we have our hazard statements on the left associated with a code as well as the statement itself. You'll also see that we do have a search bar at the bottom. One thing to make note of when it comes to hazard statements as well as precautionary statements, they are a very standardized process, so anything that is going to be mentioned on the SDS should be word for word for what we do have listed in these statements. This can be very helpful, as if we notice that something might begin with fire, for example, I'll go ahead and start typing in fire, and as I type that, we'll notice that we see this fire or protection hazard, as that's going to be the only applicable one that begins with that term fire specifically. From here, we can just click on that. That'll highlight it and enter the text down below, and I can add statement, which will then actually add it onto the label itself. Now that I do have that added, as it may not be applicable to the chemical I'm filling this information out for, though, I will remove the statement using this option on the right, which of course you can do as well in the event that you ever do add something that's not necessary. I'm going to go ahead and start adding in the information that's needed for my SDS sheet. Once I have everything entered, I'll come back to this screen and show you guys the next process. Now that I'm back, I have everything added in that we're going to need for the hazard statement specifically for this one, but I did want to show you guys an example of an additional hazard statement that requires these parameters to also be filled out. For this example, I'm going to go ahead and click on this one where we can see that it has the sentence involving state route of exposure. I'll click on this add statement, and then we want to click on this option here, and that's going to unlock this ability to edit this parameter. That way we give the appropriate information for that as well. Since this isn't something that I need on my label specifically, though, I'll go back, remove the statement itself, and since I am done with all of what's needed, I'll just click on OK, and we can see everything's now been added to this hazard statement. Next, I'm going to start working on the precautionary statements themselves. Essentially, this will work the same as the hazard statements. Feel free to search for anything that's necessary. It should match one-to-one what's on the SDS sheet. Alternatively, with the precautionary statements, you do have the ability to create a statement itself by clicking on Create Statement. Once that's there, feel free to click on the statement section. You may need to double-click it, highlight anything that's needed, and enter the text you need in the event that you don't see an option available from our list. Since I'm not sure if I'm going to need any of these custom created statements at this time, I'm going to go ahead and remove the statement for now. I'm going to go back to my SDS sheet, get all the precautionary statements added in, and come back to this screen once everything's ready. Now that I have all the statements that I need added in, you may have noticed that there are a few that may have these ellipses in them, or you may notice that there are some that have a little extra information than what the SDS sheet provided. This just means for these sections, we may need to make some edits to the text itself. In order to do that, we can always just click on it. This should highlight the text. We can then click again to get to the section we need to make changes to and edit that text to more accurately represent what's included on the SDS sheet. I'm going to get these quick edits done. Once I am done, I'll just click OK, and then we can show you what the actual template looks like. With that now done, we have a mostly completed label, and all that's left is to add the supplier information. In order to do that, you'll still want to refer to the SDS sheet. The information for that should be in section 1, and then as far as the label goes, you'll just look for the supplier section at the bottom and click on this pencil edit icon on the right. From here, you'll just follow along the SDS sheet, getting the relevant information added into the appropriate fields. After I'm done adding that in, I'll go ahead and come back to this section. That way I can show you guys how to save it and reuse it if needed. Once you have all the information filled out according to your SDS sheet, you can go ahead and click on the Save option. You'll then notice that the saved supplier's name should be matching the actual supplier name, and then you can click on Close. It may not always update the supplier information, so if you do need to make that change like I do, you'll go back down into the supplier area, click on the drop-down menu again, and select the appropriate supplier information. That way it does get added to the bottom of the label. And now that that supplier information is saved, if you do have additional chemicals from the same supplier, you can always quickly get access to that information again instead of needing to always enter that. From here, the label is ready to print, as it is still going to be compliant due to having these blacked out diamonds. However, like I mentioned earlier, I do want to switch this template over to only have the single diamond available. In order to make that change, I'm just going to go into our settings option here along the right, and I want to make sure that I change this diamond supply from the current product default over to 1 diamond. Now that I've made that change, I'll just want to make sure that I have the correct setting for my print diamond borders on. Ultimately, I don't want diamond borders to print for this label, so it being deselected, it's currently going to be the correct setting. If you are printing with something like a Kodiak Max and you do want to use red ribbon to include those diamonds, you may want that to be on. Since that isn't something that I need though, I'm going to make sure to deselect it, and from here I'm ready to print. Like I mentioned earlier, if you do need to actually change the authority type from whatever was selected initially, you can still do that. Before making that change though, I do recommend that you make sure to save the record itself, that way you don't accidentally have to restart this whole process. In order to save the record, you'll just want to select this floppy disk icon that has the stack of coins. That'll then give you the option to save current record or save as new record. We can go ahead and just do that save current record and click OK. Now that we have it saved, we'll just go ahead and click on this flag icon in the top left hand corner, and I'll go ahead and select the GHS option, and we can see that it updates the label to look more similar to the GHS standard as opposed to the HazCom standard. For my needs though, I'm going to still stick with the actual HazCom one, so I'll just change that back really quick, and from here we're ready to print. Hopefully you were able to learn a couple of things about creating your own chemical label when following an SDS sheet. Thank you for watching the video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for watching. For further assistance, visit our website and contact our team for your free lifetime support.